It was coming up to my 43rd birthday, and I felt I needed to do something to improve my fitness levels. And, while I enjoyed mountain walks, I was never very keen on the idea of Monroe bagging merely for the sake of it. I did need an objective, though, something to aim for, to motivate me. I just wasn't sure what it was. The closest mountain range to Inverness was Glen Affric, so I decided that was as good a place as any to go for a walk. And while scanning some satellite imagery of the area, I came across something strange. In the middle of the mountains, on a dirt track road that started directly from a loch and simply faded away into nothing, there appeared to be some kind of building. It wasn't marked on any map, OS or otherwise, and as I looked closer it appeared that at least two other smaller buildings were nearby. I checked multiple aerial maps and it was present in them all, so it had to have been there for a while. The two smaller buildings might just be abandoned sheds, but the larger one appeared to be well maintained. What was this building? Why was it so far away from civilization, absent from any map, on a short road to nowhere? I needed to know what this was. I had my objective, and it was time to begin my journey. On the 14th of August 2021, I packed a rucksack with everything I thought I would need, including a tent and ground mat, as I planned to stay there on Saturday night and come home on the Sunday. The original plan was to leave from the circuit car park and then head towards Affric Lodge, then cross north along the clearly marked path on Ordnance Survey, and at the end of the day I would camp out just across the mystery building on the flat area here. There I would have easy access to both water and my personal objective, so I'd stay the night and then just head back the next morning the same way I'd come. Easy, right? Well, the first problem was that I severely underestimated how long it would take me to walk this distance, and I didn't set off until about 3 p.m. Secondly, I had seriously overpacked my rucksack simply because there was space to put all the things I might need at some point. Things did go to plan at first, though, and I made it over the first hill and came down this path to the river where the OS map assured me that there would be fords. Turns out, though, that OS maps are not always accurate, and while there were supposed to be multiple fords here, there were not. It took me over an hour to find a safe way over this river with my backpack. I'd brought things like sandals and a towel just for this occasion, but they were of no use to me. It was just too deep to even use those. And when that energy sapping experience had been overcome, I came to the steepest path on the trip, and I had to ascend it with my overladen backpack until I got to this large stone. Now, the OS map shows just a single path, right? When I got here, I didn't even see the tiny path disappearing into the heather, so I instead followed this well-defined path going up here. I mean, if you're only expecting one path, you'd do the same, right? I mean, look, it's barely visible. Anyway, turns out this well-defined path is unmarked on the OS, and so I end up wandering off in the wrong direction. When I started getting into the cliffs, I realised I was going the wrong way, so I came back to Lardstone and camped by the river there. I didn't actually take any video of my first attempt, but this is where I camped. I filmed all this on my second attempt. You'd think that camping right by the river would keep me awake, but I was so exhausted by that time that I just didn't care. The next morning, I took the long route back to the car park because I didn't want to try and cross the river again. I'd been defeated, but at least came away with some experience and knowledge for the next time. 2 weeks later, I made a fresh attempt, this time leaving much earlier in the day, knowing I would need those extra hours, and my backpack was much lighter, although it actually still took too much again. This time I tried starting from a completely different car park, although it still wasn't the best one to use, as it turned out later. The scenery was nice at least, and the fords were actually crossable from this direction, but it did have a glaring problem in that the path vanished at one point and I had to cross the bogs as if I was taking the ring to Mordor. I did rejoin familiar territory after that though, and eventually made my way back to where I'd camped 2 weeks prior, whereupon I stopped to record some video on my phone. Just as I was finishing up, some young girl came jogging up the same steep hill that I'd barely been able to walk up and joyfully exclaimed "Hi" as she jogged past up the clearly defined path towards the cliffs, barely breaking a sweat. I knew nothing about her, but at that moment I hated her. So anyway, I then at last made my way up to new territory along the hidden path marked on the OS and ventured up the valley. I made it up to the highest point that I intended to reach on this trip in the dip between the Monroes Tomachynich and Bealach Talisa, where I stopped for another rest and to take some more video. While I was doing that, who should come jogging down from the highest peak but the very same young woman I had seen the last time I was resting. She was actually the only person I saw my entire time out there, and the fact that I bumped into her twice is really quite extraordinary given how far in the middle of nowhere we were. Hot today, isn't it? She commented, on what I assume was a sympathetic reasoning for why I was dripping in sweat, though it failed to explain why she was still fresh as a daisy. Anyway, this was enough for me for one day. My right leg was aching, so I decided I should make camp nearby and head towards my destination first thing in the morning. That way I could leave all the rest of my stuff in my tent, and only take the essential with me for the rest of the trip. While I was making camp, that's when the midges came, in their millions. I rushed to get the tent up and dived inside, spending the next hour or two killing the few hundred midges that had gotten with me to try and make my tent my safe space. The wind did pick up a couple of times before nightfall, so I was able to leave the tent to brush my teeth, etc. here and there. I even got a chance to fly the drone, but then the midges came back while I was in the air, so I had to abandon that pretty quickly too. At the end of the night, I noticed I was being watched by what I can only assume were deer. I didn't sleep very well though. My leg was aching, I was having odd waking dreams. It was around 6 a.m. when I packed up my emergency tent, first aid kit, waterproofs, food and water into my day pack, and left everything else behind in the tent as I continued on my way towards my goal. Things went fine until I reached this area here, where the path just vanished, and decided to eyeball it instead based on the fact that I knew that this island was in the direction that I needed to go. I didn't know this, but sometimes a path can totally fade from sight, and when that happens, people mark the route with single stones. It's hard to spot from this photo, but take a look at this satellite view. The path is clear here, fades to nothing here, and then becomes clear again later. In the meantime, the path is marked by this line of stones, so there's no path, it's just a line of stones. Here's a much clearer example a bit further up. Again, no path as such, but the stones mark the way down. Of course, I didn't know about this at the time, and I ended up leaving the path altogether and headed down this steep mountainside here, roughly this way. This certainly didn't do my right leg any favours though, and by the time I got to the bottom, it was aching so badly that I couldn't even bend it anymore. But I was well beyond the point of no return by now. I also noticed something man-made when a bright orange shape appeared in the mass of greens and browns, so I made my way over to investigate it. Seemed to be some sort of feeding station for something, but I honestly couldn't tell you what. Deer, maybe? I don't know. So I made it onto the road to nowhere, and was able to waddle onwards while keeping one leg bolted straight and being dependent upon my walking poles maybe a little too much. And then, after 4 days, I finally laid eyes on my objective. Just a few feet further, and I could see the other two buildings as well, although there wasn't much to see there. The first had the same orange bowl that I'd seen earlier in it, along with some hay, but the second hut was sealed shut altogether. I'm guessing that they were both abandoned huts and had nothing to do with the main building. But what was the main building? Honestly, I'm still not sure. When I came up to it, I saw the padlock had been torn off, so I thought I could go in, but it turned out to be locked anyway, so I don't know why the padlock was even there. It had 4 beds and 2 bedrooms, a toilet, and a living space. Right here is the only clue I got to what it really is. I think these are MREs. The label on them read combat rations, at least. I didn't record much as frankly I just wanted to get back and rest my leg, but I'm guessing this is a military outpost for mountain training or something. It was certainly in a nice area, right next to this waterfall. Maybe they would come across the lock in a dinghy to get here, given that the road led right to the shore. I don't know. Anyway, my mission had been accomplished. It was time to go back. There was no way I could go back the way I'd come with my leg, so I tried to find an easier route back up. I must have missed the path somewhere at first and went round this way, but I did rejoin the path shortly afterwards. The pace was slow because of my leg, but it was about 11 a.m. by now, so I still had plenty of time, which was good because I needed to rest often. I eventually got all the way back to the tent, where I rested some more and then got everything packed up, ready to head home. Turns out that going downhill with one unbendable leg is actually a lot more difficult than climbing uphill. Try going down some stairs with one leg bolted to get the effect, then imagine doing that from a height of nearly 900 meters. When I eventually got back to here, I couldn't face going to Mordor again, so instead I went down this way, and that's when I discovered that there was a hidden car park right here. See, I had ignored this as the street view of the area is not up to date. I knew this from walking past here the previous time. None of it was here anymore. There was nowhere to park. Until I discovered that car park just meters up the road from there. As it was, though, I had to waddle up the road a few more miles to the car park. I got back at 7 p.m. It had taken me 13 hours to walk from the tent to my goal and back to the car park. So what did I learn? First of all, I learned not to put my full trust in OS maps. Don't get me wrong, they're great as guides, but too many times it told me there's a ford there that wasn't, or that there was a path there that was. I also overpacked both times. I brought too much food, and I needn't have bothered bringing the wee stove, as there was nowhere I could put it down. Same deal for the drone. The one time I thought I had found somewhere that I could land it, this happened. I also learned that distances on a map are much further away than they actually look, especially for someone like me who's not really that fit. But honestly, I think the most interesting thing I learned was about looking for lines of stones when a path vanishes. I used to go mountain climbing a lot with my dad when I was a kid, and I genuinely never even knew that this was a thing. My leg took over a week to recover from that little mountain ramble, and as the nights were drawing in, I decided to make that my last hike of 2021. But despite the leg and being eaten alive by the midges, I still loved the opportunity to have an adventure in my own country at a time when having them in other countries was simply not an option. And I do feel sure that I'll be trying a few of these again in 2022. The views alone make the agony of the trek worth it.